Welcome to my channel, Hidden Points. Imagine for a moment that everything you think you know about loyalty in relationships is only a surface reflection. Beneath it lies a vast, hidden landscape of fear, desire, attachment, and shadow impulses. Most people never see this territory because they're too busy judging behavior, labeling actions, or chasing appearances. The truth is, loyalty is never simple, it's never absolute, and it's rarely conscious. To understand it, you must look beyond words, promises, and gestures, and into the unconscious motivations that drive behavior. The first truth is that every human being is wired to seek security and validation. When these needs are unmet or threatened, the unconscious mind activates protective mechanisms that shape loyalty in ways few people notice. These mechanisms are subtle, invisible, and often contradictory. Now, let's go deeper. Attachment theory provides the framework to see these patterns clearly. We develop attachment strategies in early life based on parental responsiveness, emotional availability, and relational safety. These strategies manifest in adulthood as anxious, avoidant, ambivalent, or secure orientations. The shadow of loyalty emerges when these attachment dynamics intersect with a fear of loss, control, insecurity, and the desire for power or influence within a relationship. When a person operates unconsciously, these shadows can distort loyalty, creating patterns of dependence, manipulation, self-protection, or conditional commitment. Now consider the role of projection. People project their unmet needs, desires, and fears onto their partners. When these projections interact with the partner's own shadows, an invisible dance begins where loyalty is tested not by reality, but by internalized expectations and perceived threats. The man or woman who doesn't recognize this dynamic may misinterpret behavior as betrayal, disloyalty, or selfishness, when in fact it's the unconscious mind defending itself. Imagine a relationship where both partners are unaware of these forces. Loyalty becomes a constant tension, a fragile construct maintained through control, monitoring, reassurance, and subtle power struggles. In this environment, small triggers escalate into arguments, suspicion, and emotional distance because the unconscious mind interprets normal human behavior as threats. Now let's explore the conscious alternative. When a person begins to observe their own attachment triggers, shadow projections, and unconscious desires, loyalty shifts from a reactive performance to an intentional alignment. The person begins to act from self-mastery, awareness, and understanding rather than compulsion or fear. This doesn't mean loyalty becomes rigid obedience or blind fidelity. It means that commitment is informed by insight, integrity, and psychological presence. The person recognizes that loyalty can't be enforced externally. It must emerge internally from conscious choice and an alignment of values. Now consider energy dynamics. Loyalty is maintained through emotional investment, attention, and presence. When energy is scattered through reactivity, defensiveness, or the pursuit of validation, loyalty erodes because the unconscious mind detects inconsistency, instability, and threat. The person who cultivates internal stability, awareness, and self-regulation naturally generates the energy that sustains loyalty without coercion or effort. Let's examine boundaries, because loyalty without boundaries is fragile and conditional. But boundaries without loyalty are cold and isolating. A thriving relational dynamic requires the integration of both. The man or woman who understands this navigates attachment and loyalty with clarity, balance, and psychological insight, creating a relational environment where trust, intimacy, and connection flourish naturally. Now, reflect on shadow integration. Loyalty triggers our shadow impulses: fear of abandonment, jealousy, possessiveness, control, and reactive attachment. When these shadows are unacknowledged, they manifest unconsciously as subtle tests, manipulations, or emotional withdrawal. The partner interprets these as disloyalty, and the cycle continues. The person who observes and integrates their shadow transforms these impulses into conscious choice, presence, and constructive communication. Loyalty then becomes a reflection of integrity, consistency, and psychological depth. Consider relational alignment. Loyalty is strongest when values, vision, and emotional needs are shared. Conscious alignment of purpose and expectation reduces unconscious tension and conflict and fosters natural trust and commitment. This is why some relationships endure extreme stress and challenge without breaking. while others crumble under minor strain because the unconscious shadows were left unexamined and unmanaged. Let's explore emotional literacy. The ability to recognize, understand, and articulate feelings without projection or blame is critical to maintaining loyalty under pressure. When both partners cultivate emotional literacy, they are able to navigate triggers, conflict, and misunderstanding without eroding the bond. The unconscious mind perceives stability, reliability, and psychological attunement as the foundation of loyalty and commitment. Now, examine the role of choice and freedom. Loyalty is often mistaken for restriction or obligation. Yet, true psychological loyalty emerges when both partners act from conscious alignment and voluntary commitment, rather than fear, duty, or compulsion. When freedom is honored, trust is deepened, and the bond is strengthened. Reflect on the unconscious tests. The shadow of loyalty often manifests as unconscious testing, seeking reassurance, creating small crises, or observing reactions to gauge commitment. The person who is conscious of this dynamic can recognize these tests as expressions of internal insecurity and address them with presence, understanding, and communication, rather than defensiveness or withdrawal. Now, consider resilience. Every relationship faces stress, pressure, and challenge. The durability of loyalty depends on the ability to withstand these pressures with awareness, integration, and adaptive coping strategies. The man or woman who thrives under stress maintains psychological balance, emotional stability, and relational presence. These qualities generate trust, security, and commitment naturally. Let's examine projection reversal. The shadows we observe in our partner often reflect aspects of ourselves that are unacknowledged and unresolved. When we integrate these projections, our perception of loyalty changes. We stop interpreting behavior as threat, manipulation, or betrayal and begin to see the reality of alignment, misalignment, and unconscious influence. This insight transforms relationships from fragile, performance-based bonds to psychologically stable, resilient partnerships. Reflect on the deep psychological truth: loyalty is not a static trait or a moral virtue. It is a dynamic psychological state influenced by attachment, security, shadow integration, emotional literacy, energy management, boundaries, and conscious choice. The individual who cultivates these qualities experiences loyalty not as a burden or test, but as a natural reflection of an integrated self and alignment with their partner. Consider relational feedback loops. Every action, emotion, and response generates feedback in the partner's unconscious mind. Awareness of these loops allows for conscious navigation of loyalty triggers, projections, and attachment dynamics, preventing escalation into suspicion, distrust, or the erosion of commitment. The person who masters this dynamic creates a self-reinforcing system of trust, security, and sustained attachment. Reflect on shadow triggers in daily life. Minor slights, misunderstandings, and differences often activate fear, anxiety, or neediness. When these are unconscious, they challenge loyalty and commitment. When conscious, they become opportunities for observation, reflection, and relational growth. The energy previously expended in reactivity is now channeled into presence, alignment, and constructive engagement. This is how loyalty deepens over time, not through effort or control, but through psychological maturity and self-mastery. Now, consider the final integration. Loyalty, attachment, and relational stability are interdependent. They require continuous self-awareness, shadow work, emotional literacy, energy management, boundary clarity, and conscious choice. The individual who embodies these qualities experiences relationships where loyalty isn't tested through crisis, manipulation, or neediness, but is a natural reflection of alignment, trust, presence, and depth. The shadows that once sabotaged connection are transformed into insight, resilience, and relational cohesion. This is the profound hidden truth about loyalty that few people see and even fewer understand. When you integrate these principles into your life, relationships evolve from fragile bonds into psychologically resilient partnerships where trust, depth, commitment, and presence are naturally sustained. This is how the shadow of loyalty is revealed, not as restriction or fear, but as a deep, integrated, conscious connection that endures and thrives. Thank you so much for watching. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content on deep psychology and relationships. See you in the next video.